Happy Monday, everyone. It's meteorologist Joe Martucci along with my weather brother Sean Sublette, and we are back with another edition of Hurricane Hunt. Sean, Hurricane Tammy did make landfall in the
Mhm.
Caribbean as we thought.
Yeah, just kind of grazing a lot of the islands in the Lesser Antilles, the leeward, windward islands. When they did so, or when the storm did so, it still had some 85 to 90-mile-an-hour winds making landfall in Barbuda on Saturday evening. But from this point, it has now moved northward from the Caribbean. I want to say it's a drift, but it's moving slowly northward. We do expect it to kind of turn back toward the coastline in the neighborhood of Bermuda, but weakened dramatically in that time frame for a good number of reasons. But for the shorter term, there are no imminent threats to land. But there's some good reasons why we do expect it to weaken further. Take us through the satellite imagery, Joe.
Yeah, so we're looking at all of the Atlantic right now, and it's actually pretty darn quiet, with the exception of Tammy. So that's the only storm we're going to focus on here in this edition of Hurricane Hunt. You see those blues and those oranges there. That's indicative of some we call convection or thunderstorms blossoming here. Now, the red dots that you see is the track of Tammy, and you see it passing through some of these islands like Barbuda, getting close to Guadeloupe, places in the northern part of what we call the Lesser Antilles. It's a Cat 1 hurricane right now, maximum sustained winds of 80 miles an hour. It's really barely hanging on as a Cat 1, and then moving to the north. Now we look at the forecast track here, and it's making a curve to the east and then to the west into Bermuda. Now, for someone like me who lives in New Jersey, and if you're watching this in New Jersey, it always reminds you of Sandy anytime you see something like this. However, this is not going to be Sandy for a couple of reasons here. Sean's going to talk about the water temps, but I just want to say, too, by the time we get to next week, because you can see it's getting into Bermuda on Saturday here, so it's still a long ways out, it's going to get picked up by a cold front and move back to the east. So it's kind of making this zigzag pattern through the Atlantic. But Sean, talk about those water temps and what it means for this intensity as it does weaken from, a category 1, maybe category 2, into what we
Yeah.
call an extratropical cyclone.
Right. And the impacts really don't change that much. There's a lot of kind of, inside baseball, the jargon, tropical, extra tropical. When we say it's extra tropical, it means it loses its warm core center. It's still out there, it's still a cyclone, it's still a spinning storm. Just the source of energy has changed. That's really the big difference. But to Joe's point, you see up there in Bermuda, the water temperatures are now below 80 degrees. So as this storm begins to move farther north in progressively cooler water, it is not going to have that fuel, that warm water fuel, to continue to maintain itself. And Joe, to your other point, when we're looking at the guidance or the steering winds 6-7 days from now, as you mentioned, everything is very strong from west to east. So even if this thing does briefly turn back to the coast, it is going to be whisked out to sea early parts of next week.
Yeah. We look at our climatology, our hurricane climatology. We've been showing this chart for months. We continue our downward slide here now that we're in late October. I can't even believe I'm saying that, but late
Yeah.
October. We are pretty quiet typically in the Atlantic hurricane basin, pretty much as quiet. And this is interesting, as quiet as about August 1st. People, and even for me as a
Mhm.
meteorologist, I think August, hurricane season. But to be honest, it's just as light of a load on average in terms of hurricane climatology as then.
I always try to tell people mid-August to mid-October. That's the 60 days, man. That's when you're into the teeth of hurricane season, is that 60-day period. So we're exiting out of that. And again, that doesn't mean there won't be anything, but in terms of keeping an eye on the tropics on a regular basis, don't need to do that as much.
Absolutely. And John, take us home here.
Yeah, so again, with Tammy moving northward after making landfall, I would hope, it's too early to say for certain, but we would hope or have we're cautiously optimistic this will be the last legit hurricane of the season. Had that in winds of 90 miles an hour for a brief stretch as it begins to turn back toward Bermuda and toward the East Coast, but it's never really going to get to the East Coast. The steering winds 5-6 days from now are just going to be too strong from west to east. This does not pose any threat to the continental United States.
Yes. And Sean, I just want to say I'm sorry for your Nittany
I
Lions loss
knew
on
you were going to
Saturday.
say that, man. I knew you were going to say
I'm
that. But
very sorry to hear that.
congratulations to the Scarlet Knights. They're
Hey,
getting it done.
bowling for the
But
first time legitimately since 2014. I know for in Penn State world, bowling is just you don't even blink when that happens for you. But for us, we do, and we're loving it.
Yeah, yeah, we've got some soul searching to do, which sadly it's that's what you hear from the alums. A lot of us are kind of tired of losing to Ohio State. It's just the way of the world. I
Hey,
love Coach Franklin, but I know a lot of people are just kind of tired of losing to Ohio State.
I understand. As I told one of my friends, I don't know who like else is better out there. Sometimes the
Yeah,
grass isn't always the greener. Look at Nebraska, for example. Sorry to
exactly,
all of our
exactly.
Nebraska
We're
fans.
we're not Nebraska, so I'm happy. It's frustrating, but when I look at the program as a whole, I am happy. I really am happy. It's just you have a week like this, and look, we get Michigan at home. We
There you
get
go.
Michigan at home. We can learn from this. It'll be a raucous crowd. I'm still optimistic that we have a shot against Michigan. So we'll see.
We shall see.
We
For
shall
Sean
see.
Sublette, I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. Thanks for watching this edition of Hurricane Hunt. We really appreciate it. We'll be back with you soon if we do see another storm system.